Yes, I'm Mark Donnedu, for those that haven't heard about me, and I'm going to be doing a presentation called Eating Up the World, and it's all about how plant-based diets can help prevent and reverse some of our major illnesses that we experience. Now, the Eating Up the World booklet, now, is there anyone who hasn't actually seen the Eating Up the World booklet or doesn't have a copy of it?
Oh, I have.
Okay. There's a copy. It's a booklet that we did last October, and it's a follow-up to our environmental booklet that we did in 2009. And just to sort of recap the environmental booklet, it basically talked about how in Australia we're actually losing more native species than any other continent on Earth apart from North America, mainly because of animal industries. We have a situation where the water usage that goes into beef is about 50,000 litres compared to only 500 litres for a kilo of potatoes. And it's the biggest use of water in Australia is animal industries. The greenhouse emissions from animal industries are actually so severe that they're actually more than the world's transport and also power stations combined. Pretty massive. And the land degradation that we've got from animal industries is responsible for 92% of our land degradation in Australia, which is quite extraordinary. Has anyone heard of this information before? Yeah.
I read the book.
Yeah, that's good. And the way we're going with our oceans, with the overfishing that we're doing now, we're in a situation where we've lost 90% of our fish from 1950, and if we keep going this way, we won't have any fish by the year 2047. And when it comes to the amount of grain that we feed cattle worldwide, it's enough to feed 8.7 billion people, more than the world's entire population. So that was some of the statistics from that particular booklet, and that had just 37 references in it. That's all it was. Now, this new booklet's got 259 references by comparison, so you can see just how much more studies we've had to draw on for this particular health booklet, which is the red version, which is the Eating Up the World. Now, the very first thing that I'm going to actually bring up is about our perception of what's covered when it comes to health. Now, many of us rely on the media for our information, but one of the problems with that is the media give you a very biased view of what's really going on health-wise. And if you want evidence of this, I'm going to present that now. In fact, this study actually shows that in 2003 that SARS and bioterrorism killed less than a dozen people. And yet, how much media coverage did they actually get? If you have a look, they got a massive amount. There was something like 100,000 media reports on those two subjects. So it's almost like it's inversely proportional to how many people are affected is how much coverage you actually get. Now, to sort of graph that, you can see here that SARS and bioterrorism only killed just a handful of people, and yet the number of media reports were in the many tens of thousands. And yet the number of people actually affected were virtually hardly any at all. And yet some of the biggest causes of death, such as, say, for example, smoking, physical inactivity, and most of all is food-related illnesses like heart disease, for example, that's virtually off the charts. And according to this scientific paper, it actually said that it's a bit hard to actually see what it says there, but basically, the intensity of media coverage was inversely correlated with the actual number of deaths for health risks evaluated. So, in other words, things like heart disease and cancer, which affect the majority of people, are hardly reported by the media. In fact, the pattern observed suggests that the more commonplace the cause of death, the less likely it is to be covered by the media. So, no wonder people are confused about what's important and what isn't when it comes to their health. Now, this is an interesting study, this particular one, where it actually talked about how health professionals don't know as much about health as they actually think that they know. And in fact, it goes on further to say that the average person on the street, when tested, compared to doctors, actually knew less about health and nutrition than the doctors knew less about health and nutrition than the patients that they were actually treating. It's quite extraordinary. In fact, this is an example, an extract from that paper, where it actually showed doctors versus the general public, and when it came to knowledge about diet and chronic heart disease, the person on the street outscored doctors. Now that is a staggering situation. So the question is, how is that possible? Well, to sort of dig into that a little bit further, this is what actually they found in this is a 2011 study. It actually says these perceptions lead to misplaced complacency among health professionals and explain why they have a lack of knowledge. They don't perceive that the lack of knowledge is a barrier to them actually counselling or even treating their own patients. And so the situation is that they know very little about health and nutrition. So to understand exactly why that is, we have to get to the root cause of how the medical studies are actually conducted, a 7-year medical course, how the funding is generated for it, and what sort of information they actually get. And this quote actually sort of sums things up. It says that people are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and are treated by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. And in fact, the whole medical system is basically one where people are funded by the sicker people are, the more sales that they actually generate, in terms of pharmaceutical drugs, in terms of treatments, operations, and so forth. And according to Richard Smith, who was the editor of probably the most prestigious health magazine or medical journal in the world, the British Medical Journal, and he was involved with that for 13 years as editor. He was quoted as saying that, I want to begin this article with a fantasy, one that is powerful and holds in the minds of many. Doctors treat patients using simply the best evidence and their experience. They are not influenced by money or self-interest. Then he goes on to say, that is, of course, complete nonsense. And when you have a look at the amount of funding that the pharmaceutical industries, put into training of doctors, you can actually see that the more doctors get free prescription drugs or they get incentives, so too the more that their sales actually increase, and there's a direct correlation, straight line relationship between those. And you can see that prescription drug sales estimated to be around $300 billion a year, and the marketing to physicians is about $20 billion a year. And they also fund most of the medical schools as well. A lot of people think it's independent government funding, but it's actually not. It's a big pharma actually are involved in funding a lot of that. And in this particular paper, it actually says the pharmaceutical companies spend billions of dollars on influencing education and entertainment of doctors around the world. And most interestingly is the next line underneath, cardiologists were more than twice as likely as family practitioners to receive payments. Now, that's not unsurprising for two reasons. First of all, our biggest killer in Australia and also in the United States and in the Western world is heart disease. And ironically, the simple treatment for that is diet and avoiding the animal foods that lead to heart disease, the high cholesterol, that lead to inflammation, the high blood pressure, all these sorts of factors are all basically diet related. And the more plant-based a person's diet, the less they're going to get these particular problems, and the more meat-based diet, all the evidence shows that they're going to get more instances of heart disease. So that's why that area has been targeted more than any, is because if doctors really knew the evidence, and which was basically pointing to a plant-based diet as a way of preventing and reversing heart disease, then some of their biggest selling drugs, like Lipitor, for example, cholesterol-lowering medication, they wouldn't be able to sell them, with an honest belief, because Lipitor was only effective in 3% of cases, and yet a whole foods plant-based diet can reverse and prevent heart disease in over 70 or 80% of cases by comparison. So you can see that there's no way that they would be administering drugs if they actually knew that the science behind what causes heart disease, and knew the science on how to reverse it as well. And so that's why these corporate interests have been so successful in creating a cloud of confusion in the general public. And then the next article actually goes on to say that family practitioners reported the highest average number of meetings with industry representatives, and that is 16 meetings per month. So in other words, pharmaceutical reps are now communicating to the doctors 16 times in a month. Now, considering there's 20 working days in a week, that's almost once a day. Now these pharmaceutical reps often have no medical training anyway, In fact, I knew one that used to work at Vildex, where I used to work years ago, and he was a taxi driver before he became a pharmaceutical rep, and he was giving doctors advice on what drugs to take. This is the insane thing. Now, it's now one a day now that they're getting these visits. About 20 years ago, it used to be 4 times a month. So you can see how things have changed and are getting worse rather than better in that respect. So that just gives you a little bit of an overview why doctors aren't necessarily the best people to go to when it comes to health and nutrition. And of course, according to that evidence, the patients probably would be a better place to start than the doctors for getting health information. Now, one of the things we talk about in the booklet is about the health crisis that we've got now. We're in a situation where there are preventable diseases like diabetes that are now at record levels. We're in a situation where about 1 in 3 people are going to be affected by type 2 diabetes, which was a condition that was quite rare by comparison many, many years ago. And we're not just seeing it in the Western world, we're now seeing in countries like China. China used to have one of the lowest rates of type 2 diabetes of anywhere in the world. And back in 1974, when the Premier of China had cancer, he did a survey of all the people in China and found they had less than 0.5% of the population had type 2 diabetes. Now, he was dying of cancer, and he wanted to know what the relationship was between diet and death and illness. And so he asked a professor from Cornell University by the name of T. Colin Campbell to be involved in this very large study. And T. Colin Campbell at first was reluctant to get involved with this study, which later on became the China study. But initially he was reluctant to get involved because he basically looked at the population of China, who back in 1974 was consuming 1/10 the animal foods compared to the United States. So his conclusion was, well, this is virtually a vegetarian population because they're not consuming much animal foods. What are we going to possibly learn from this population? And he was encouraged to continue anyway because they said, no, there's a big difference in what people are eating throughout China. There's 65 major provinces there that we want to examine, and that they are having very, very different diets and have different health consequences as a result. So he got persuaded to do this study, and he also had a famous statistician from Oxford University help him compile some data. And then by about 2000, they had compiled a huge amount of data looking at 880 million people over a 30-year period. And the conclusions were quite amazing. You know, when it came to diabetes, for example, they found one province of about 250,000 people with not one person that had type 2 diabetes, and yet in another area that consumed a lot of animal foods, had 30% of that province had diabetes, which is an extraordinary difference. And in those days, the people that had diabetes was less than 0.5%. But now, considering that in 2017, the amount of meat consumption has increased 13 times, that's 13,000% in China, they now have more people with diabetes than anywhere in the world. 14% of their population has got diabetes. And ironically, they're consuming less sugar than they were back then, because the amount of white rice consumption per head has actually dropped, because in the early days they were mostly having white rice and vegetables, and a large percentage of their population was what they called peasant farmers, and they didn't have a lot of money to buy meat and would just eat rice and vegetables. Now that they can afford to eat a lot more meat, the diabetes has gone through the roof and consuming less sugar as well. So, you know, we mentioned the China study in this as a very, very important study for people to have a look at. And if anyone hasn't seen the book, I recommend definitely checking that out. One of the things we talk about is obesity. Obesity is something that is increasing rapidly around the world. And in fact, about a decade ago, the number of obese people superseded the number of starving people in the world. And that happened for the first time over a decade ago. And now it's even worse. The number of starving people is about 790 million. The number of obese people is virtually double that now. It's about close to about 1.5 billion people. And it's on the increase. And the standard Western diet is largely to blame for that. In fact, one of the things that we talk about in the booklet is that the body mass index of vegans is the only is quite low. It's about 23.6, and the vegans are the only group in the United States that actually maintain a healthy weight. All the other groups have got a weight that's higher than that. In fact, if you have a look here, this is the healthy range, anything below there, 25, and you can see that the vegans are in the ideal weight, whereas the vegetarians who consume, yes, they consume plants, but they also consume eggs and milk and cheese and so forth, and they're over that. They're in the slightly overweight area. Then you've got the flexitarians. There's you probably know these people. You say, are you vegetarian? They say, yeah, I'm vegetarian. Then the very next day you see them eating some chicken, or the next day you see them eating a steak or something like that. Well, that's what we call the flexitarians. But, you know, to their credit, they're not as heavy as the meat eaters, but who are the heaviest at, I think it's 28.8, it says there. Yeah. And the vegans are 23.6, the vegetarians 25.7, and the flexitarians 27.3. So the question is...
Is it questions at the end, or can we, like...
Oh, yeah, you can.
I just want to point out, a lot of vegans are athletic, and as soon as you're athletic, like your BMI generally can go quite high.
Okay, hang on. Can I hold you right there? When you say a lot of vegans are athletic, how many? Tell me.
I just, if you go to World Vegan Day, there was a big stage. As soon as you're athletic, like your BMI goes up due to muscle mass. Yeah. So vegans actually would be even lower than that.
Okay, right now
average.
I've got to hold you there.
Yep.
Because the percentage of athletes in any community is a very, very small percentage. Okay, it is true that the
not full-blown athletes, but just athletic, keep healthy.
There is a percentage, all right, but there's also a lot of junk food vegans, and there's a lot. And then they've actually. This is an important question actually, because a lot of people ask the question. You know, what's more important? Is it diet, or is it exercise that actually matters when it comes to BMI? And they've actually done that study. They've actually compared athletes versus couch potatoes on different diets. And what was interesting, there was a 10-year study where they compared people that were training 4 hours a day, doing strenuous exercise a day, but they were on a standard Western diet, and they were heavier than a vegan couch potato. And in fact, Michael Greger talks about that on nutritionfacts.org. He's done many videos on this very, very subject. He actually talks about it. He says Australian vegans, you know, had a lower BMI after 10 years than people on a standard Western diet exercising 4 hours a day. And by Australian vegans, he means people doing less than half an hour of even, say, moderate walking. So when it comes to weight, maintaining a healthy weight, diet certainly trumps exercise. Doesn't mean you can't do both, and exercise is important.
Muscle does weigh a lot, and it can throw out, particularly bodybuilders, whatever their diet, can throw out BMIs a bit.
Sure it can, yeah. But anyway, so that's something just to bear in mind. So the real question is, why is it, though, that people on plant-based diets tend to be skinnier than those on regular diets? And there's many reasons. Now, they to illustrate this, they did one study where they compared people on identical diets, they were eating exactly the same, and the same number of calories as a result. But then what they decided to do is, with one of the groups, we'll call it Group A, they decided to add the number of calories that they were consuming by 20%, but in the form of nuts. Now, nuts are very high in fat. Of all of the plant foods, one of the highest sources of fat in a plant-based diet. And so very high in calories, so they thought that this group would surely have to increase their weight somewhat because they're eating extra calories on top of what they were already eating. But much to their surprise, not only did they find that they didn't gain weight, they actually lost weight. They actually lost weight eating more calories. So how is that even possible, you may say, because we think that more calories equals more weight gain, but that's not exactly how it works, because a calorie is not a calorie when it comes to food, because there are some foods that cause the body to retain fat and actually to produce cholesterol and produce fat, and there are other foods that actually cause the body to remove fat and cholesterol out of the body. And in particular, high fibre foods are notorious for doing that. In fact, one of the principal ways that the body eliminates cholesterol out of the diet is that it binds it to fibre through a lot of the microbes that we have in our gut, and then they attach it to that, and they increases the stool size so that the body can actually eliminate out of the body all of this cholesterol, fat, toxins out of the body. And nuts do that. They give the body fibre, they give the microorganisms and in the intestines some food so that they grow in size, and then as they grow in size they increase your metabolism and actually pull a lot of the fats out of the body. Many of the fats that are in the body are there purely because the body has to isolate toxins and pollutants that are in and it can't eliminate, so it will produce fat to isolate these toxins to stop them damaging healthy tissues or organs. And to prove this, they did a study a number of years ago, which was on rats, which I don't recommend doing. In fact, I'm against animal testing, but and I'll prove why this was unnecessary, because they found out later the same thing on humans, which is more indicative. But anyway, they had two lots of rats, and they had the same number of calories, but they were putting toxins in the diet of one group of rats, and they were 36% fatter on the same calories, but they had a lot of the industrial pollutants that we have today, like pesticides, PCBs, dioxins, mercury, things that are in our food supply. So just by having extra toxins, these rats were able to put on more fat. Why? Because their body produced fat to isolate these toxins to stop them from damaging their healthy organs and and their tissues and damaging their blood supply. So, and there's no more polluted foods on the world than animal foods, especially when it comes to fish and meat of all kinds, dairy products. They're loaded in these sort of toxins. So there's more to weight gain and weight loss than just the number of calories. In fact, the number of calories is almost irrelevant when you really look at the fact that certain foods can have the same calories, and you have such a dramatically different effect on the body. You could be eating the same number of calories of broccoli, the same number of calories of meat, and get a totally different result when it comes to whether you're going to be fat or whether you're going to lose that fat. Now, the other thing that we also mentioned in this section here about optimum health was about longevity. And when they've looked at some of the longest living people in the world, for example, there was a study that was turned into a book called The Blue Zones, which was written by Dan Buettner, who worked for the National Geographic. And what he did is he looked at different communities around the world, and he found the longest living ones, those that had people that lived over 100 years of age, and not 1,000. Well, maybe if they keep eating a plant-based diet, maybe that one day that'll happen. But anyway, at the moment they're looking at people over 100, and what they found was that there were three centres that they highlighted that had the longest living people. Number one was the Seven-Day Adventists in Loma Linda, California. Number two was people in Okinawa, an island off Japan. And number three was a group in Sardinia, in a place called Avoda, in central Sardinia. And one thing that they all had in common was that they were very large plant eaters. The Okinawans, about 97% of their diet is plant foods. And in fact, 70% of their diet is sweet potato, in particular the purple sweet potato, which is popular over there. The group of Seven-Day Adventists, well, their religion actually wants them to be on a plant-based diet. So you have a lot of vegetarians, and you also have quite a lot of vegans. And in fact, the average vegetarian Seven-Day Adventist outlives the average Californian by 10 years, living up to about 85 years of age. And they found that the non-smoking vegans lived to 89 years by comparison, so lived an extra 4 years on top of what the vegetarians were eating. So it's 15 years improvement on what the average Californian was experiencing. And what's interesting with that is that they were living longer in what has been traditionally the smog capital of the world, because people often used to say, oh yeah, those people in the Hunza Valley, that's because they lived so long because they were drinking the glacial water and they had the fresh air, and all these other people, you know, the Vilcambrians, which also happen to be vegetarians in Ecuador, you know, over 100 years ago, yeah, they were breathing the fresh mountain air and all this sort of stuff. And we know that polluted air causes oxidation, it causes inflammation, and you don't live as long. Well, here they had the same people drinking the same air, but on different diets, and you saw a very different result. So yeah, when it comes to longevity, so plant eaters certainly have greater longevity. When you're talking about that subject, sometimes people bring up the Eskimos or the Inuits. They say, oh, well, you know, what about them? There are people that consume 95% meat and fish, and they seem to be healthy. Well, in actual fact, they are the shortest living people in the world. Their longevity is anywhere between 26 and 35 years of age, which is not very impressive. And then there are people from the Western Price Foundation who who are funded by cattle farmers, and this is according to T. Colin Campbell. He says that's where they get most of their funding from, and then they will argue, oh yeah, that's because of the processed diet that they're on now. So it's also processed foods and sugars and things. That's why they're only living there. So well, how come all the other groups that who are also eating processed food, like your average American, they're still living to 75, right? They're not dying at 26, or 35. So there's a kind of a flaw in that argument there somewhere. But and what's all funny, when you mention some African tribes and some African populations, well, most of them plant-based diets, which I'll come to in a few more slides. People often say, oh yeah, they live a long time because they have a lot of sunshine and they're out in the open air and all this sort of thing. But what's interesting is that you compare that to the two different African tribes. There's one called the Maasai, who 90% of their diet is animal blood and cow's milk, and they only live to 42 years of age. In fact, the men actually consume the most animal protein of all, and they get such bad osteoporosis that by the age of 30, the women have to actually carry them around. The women actually eat more plant foods and they live much longer than the men. Now, the Bantu, by comparison, are also an African tribe and are actually closer to the equator. The Maasai are further down, whereas the Bantu are closer to about Tanzania and then that kind of area, Kenya, and they have a very good longevity and have virtually no rates of heart disease at all in their history. And you can see a very vast difference. Well, similar tribes living in a similar area in the world, and yet one has a very good longevity and the other one doesn't. And the difference is, again, the animal foods versus the plant foods. Okay, now the next section is the heart and blood section, which is probably the most important section of this book, because our biggest killer in Australia is heart disease. And traditionally it used to be 1 in 2 Australians and 1 in 2 Americans that die of heart disease, but now because cancer is becoming more and more prevalent, it's now cancer strikes 1 in 2 women and 1 in 3 men. So cancer is now the second biggest killer. But nonetheless, heart disease is still the biggest killer of Australians. Now, what is interesting, though, is that when you compare it to an African population like this population in Uganda, when they studied them back in the 1950s, they found that out of about 14 million people, there wasn't one that actually had heart disease, which is quite an extraordinary statistic, considering that in the United States at the same time 1 in 2 were dying of heart disease. Then they broke it down and they did a randomised control study, and there they found that out of, I think, of 1,000 people, they found one person that they diagnosed as heart disease, but that person didn't actually die of that particular condition. So it was really 0 out of 1,000, whereas it was still 1 in 2 Americans. Now, what was the Ugandans' diet? The diet was basically one of plant foods. They were eating a lot of sweet potatoes and yams, had a lot of greens, and then they had grains like millet and corn. So basically just plant eaters. Some of them did have animal foods on ceremonial occasions, like maybe once a year, if that even. So they were basically plant eaters. Now, what this slide is actually showing is what causes our biggest rate of death in this country, which is the heart disease. And in particular, this is what causes most heart attacks that you actually see. And this is thrombosis, where you find a blood clot occurring as a result of a compromised environment in the arterial walls. Now here what you have is what's called arteriosclerotic plaque. And what causes that is mostly a diet. So if people are consuming animal foods, the animal fat and cholesterol will actually deposit in the arterial walls and lead to this. Now, what they've found is that when you have this kind of situation, it doesn't take much for a blood clot to occur, because often, and they found this on autopsies of people that have died of acute heart attacks, is that they find that these cholesterol crystals have protruded from this plaque and actually spill the contents out into the artery and caused inflammation and caused a blood clot to occur. In some cases, just caused the plaque to just rupture and it caused a blockage on its own right. And so, this is certainly a major cause of death. Is this arterial plaque that builds up. Now, to show you in greater detail what these cholesterol crystals that I was talking about is, you can actually see here that out of this plaque, a little crystal has emerged, and it's actually perforated the barrier of the plaque, and then caused a rupture. It's almost like having a pimple inside your arteries. You know how when you get a pimple, sometimes you, if you're a teenager and you pick it, and then sometimes it starts bleeding as well. It's because it's actually got little blood vessels that go into your bloodstream that it gives it its blood supply. So, and if that happens internally, it can lead to a blood clot and can lead to death. So you can see that these little crystals were there, and what a lot of the scientific papers have actually said is that these plaques have these lipid deposits or fat deposits that supersaturate and form these crystals. So when they supersaturate, you know, like when you take some sugar and you put it in some hot water and you keep dissolving it, and then you lower the temperature, and then you form like rock candy. It saturates and forms like a crystal. The same thing, you may know that if you're in chemistry class and you get some warm water and put copper sulfate in it, and then eventually you put it in a fridge and you get these copper sulfate crystals. It crystallises out. Well, so too, cholesterol is liquid normally at blood temperature. But if you've got too much of this cholesterol, then eventually what can actually happen is it can supersaturate, and then it can crystallise out. And these crystals cause a lot of problems. It says here that the growing crystals can expand within a confined space of the plaque and damage the fibrous cap. And in fact, what they did in the test tube is they put some of this cholesterol in there, and when that was really saturated, and they found that these crystals were actually growing on there, and they grew to such an extent that they even put like a plastic film over the top, and these crystals actually perforated the film. And this is what they look like under a microscope. They are razor sharp. Now, can you imagine if you've got that in your arterial wall, what sort of damage that's going to do? Now, never mind a bit of low-level inflammation. This will actually cause some major bleeding. It will lead to a blood clot. And they found this in the autopsies of people who died of a heart attack, but people with the same cholesterol level who died of something else, they didn't have these cholesterol crystals occur. So, you know, that is our biggest cause of death. Now, very few people are actually told about this. They just think that it's just random luck, you know, whether someone dies of a heart attack or not. But as you can see, it's anything other than that. And people on plant-based diets have got far less likelihood of getting that. Now, does that mean you're immune of getting heart disease as a vegan? The answer is no. If you have something like margarine, for example, which is made of trans fats can cause the very, very same problem in your bloodstream as saturated fat from animal food. So I absolutely recommend to not have things like margarine or hydrogenated oils at all, because they are as damaging, if not even worse, than saturated fat. Fortunately, most people on plant-based diets don't eat many of those, and so they don't get to the same sort of levels of risk as people on standard Western diets. So the other thing that we mentioned here in this heart and blood health section was about hypertension. Now, it's been shown that people who have strokes often have high blood pressure as well. And strokes are also one of the big 5 killers of Australians and Americans as well. And high blood pressure is a big part of that, where the blood is going through at a very, very fast rate, and actually causing an aneurysm, or bursting of a blood vessel, which can lead to lack of nutrients going to the brain and causing a lot of cerebral damage, which leads to a stroke. And that can be one of the worst things, where a person can no longer have use of half of their side of their body because of that. And high blood pressure basically comes about for two main reasons. The first one is that your arterial walls lose their flexibility. You've probably heard the expression hardening of the arteries. Well, that often happens when there's a lot of inflammation, which is part and parcel of a standard Western diet. And when there's inflammation, you no longer get that flexibility of the arterial wall. You also have a situation where when you're eating plant foods, you have foods that contain a lot of nitric oxide. And nitric oxide creates a flexibility in the arterial wall. And things like beetroot juice, for example, have been shown to be good for that, but also greens of all types, whether it's kale, spinach, silver beet, and rocket actually came out number one when it comes to providing the most nitric oxide for the arterial walls and giving that flexibility. But all plant foods have the ability to do that, and plant foods that are high in fibre tend to be anti-inflammatory anyway, so they move a lot of these toxins and acids that create inflammation out of the body. So you're far less likely to get hypertension as a vegan compared to a meat eater. In fact, Dr. John McDougall did a scientific paper a number of years ago where he took people with hypertension, high blood pressure, and put them on a whole foods plant-based diet, and within 10 days he had a 15 millimetre mercury drop in blood pressure, which was more than what the leading drug at the time would do, without the harmful side effects. And so that's quite staggering. Now, what is interesting is that populations around the world generally expect that as you get older, that blood pressure goes up. That's been a normal characteristic. And they say, well, that's just a natural consequence of aging. But you know, in Kenya, when they were on a totally plant-based diet, they didn't experience that problem. And in fact, as they got older, their blood pressure got lower. And researchers kind of were puzzled by this. Well, how is that even possible? What they found was that those people in Kenya were on largely plant-based diets and were having a lot of this nitric oxide, and so they had great flexibility of the arterial walls. And as they were getting older, they were actually accumulating more of these and actually and getting better flexibility. Now, those on standard Western diets didn't have that by comparison. We used to consider that low blood pressure was anything under 120 over 80. But now, and they said that if you had something like 110 over 70, that you're in a low blood pressure range. But our science has got that wrong, because what they've done is they've looked at the average American, and then they've drawn like a bell graph, and they say, well, this is the average, which is obviously the normal range, and this is, you know, outside of the extreme limits. So because if you're on the left hand side on the low limit, then that's obviously, it must be dangerously low. But in actual fact, these people in Kenya were basically disease-free with this low blood pressure. And in fact, they could run marathons at very old ages and have none of these sort of problems, whereas people with the so-called normal range of high blood pressure were actually having a lot of health issues and a lot of problems, and even getting stroke, you know, with the so-called normal blood pressure range. So what's normal in a society where it's normal to drop dead of a heart attack may not be the optimum for health. So now the next section that we talked about there is heart disease and heme iron. Now, you may have seen some reports from the World Health Organization a while ago talking about how consuming processed meats is carcinogenic as far as causing cancer, in the same category as asbestos, smoking, and even radiation, and things like plutonium. They cause them a class 1 carcinogen. Now, that's quite staggering. And one of the things that they also found was that all red meat was a category 2 carcinogen, which is a probable likely cause of cancer. And they described the red meat, why they singled that one out, was because the heme iron they described as leading to cancer through a process where cancer they described as a hemotoxic disease, or ferrotoxic disease, one of too much iron toxicity. Now, and heme iron has been shown to be very, very damaging to tissues because it's a pro-oxidant. Instead of an antioxidant that we all know, like you'll find in a lot of fruits and vegetables, that mop up the free radicals that cause damage on our tissues, the pro-oxidants actually do the opposite. They damage our tissues. They actually steal the electrons away from an atom, making it unstable and causing it to break down and have a lot of problems. So we know how bad heme iron is. Now, when it comes to heart disease, it's also been identified as a major contributor to a lot of heart problems, causing inflammation, and can also accelerate the chances of getting blood clots and all these other issues as well. And one of the concerns a lot of people have is about iron, especially women, because the doctors have for the longest time been saying You need to eat red meat in order to improve your blood, and in order to get good iron levels, and in order to reverse anemia. Now, they've been saying that for 100 years. Now, can I just have a show of hands who actually believes that actually is going to work? You eat more red meat and your blood problems will go away. You'll get rid of anemia. Who actually thinks that? No hands have gone up. Well, that's strange. Well, how come doctors are still saying it? Well, the interesting thing is that my mum had anemia at a very young age, at about 8, extremely young age, and she was told back then to eat more red meat, which she tried to do, and her iron and her anemia never improved at all. As much meat as she was eating. Now that she's on a plant-based diet, now, her anemia's gone away, and it's got optimum, iron levels. Now, what does the science show? Well, when you look at the EPIC Oxford study, where they looked at people on different diets, they found that those that eating plant-based, especially vegan, actually had better iron intakes and had actually better blood levels than those on standard Western diets. So how is that possible? Well, it's possible because what the body does is it takes non-heme iron from plants and it converts that to heme iron as is required. Now, when you're on a diet that has a lot of meat, you don't have a lot of non-heme iron, but you have a lot of heme iron. Now, the body recognises heme iron as quite damaging. So, yes, it will use some heme iron if it has to, in kind of as a poor substitute for the heme iron that the body produces. But most of it will go to the liver, where it dumps a lot of its toxins. So you have high ferritin levels, and some doctor might think, oh, you've got high ferritin levels in your liver. Oh, that's really good. Well, it's actually not good, because that actually means that you're increasing your chances of heart disease and cancer many, many times by doing that. What you actually want is have good hemoglobin levels and have good blood levels. Now, to prove that plant-based diet is the best way to do that, we actually talk about a study they did where they took people who were haemophiliacs. These are people that need daily blood transfusions because they lose blood so readily. And in fact, they cut, they will bleed indefinitely because they don't have a way of clotting. So they took these people and they gave them 100 millilitres of chlorophyll, which is a very rich drink in what is effectively the blood of the plant, which is chlorophyll. Very structurally similar to our blood, which is hemoglobin. They gave them that, and they needed 25% less blood per transfusion after they consumed the chlorophyll. So why is that so? That's because the blood of the plant, which is chlorophyll, is identical to hemoglobin except for one difference, that the centre atom of chlorophyll is magnesium and the centre atom of hemoglobin is iron. And the body actually uses the magnesium with other parts of the blood, but then allows the iron to be absorbed very easily, and you can build your blood incredibly quickly that way. And in fact, whenever they run out of blood, like in the Second World War and the First World War, the Vietnam War, often they would do blood transfusions, and they run out of blood, then they would use chlorophyll, and it would work good as a blood substitute. They even used coconut water as a blood substitute as well. And you see pictures of people on IVs of coconut water because they had nothing else. And coconut water, incidentally, is virtually identical in terms of nutrients and the nutrient profile compared to human blood. And in fact, in Polynesian countries where the mother can no longer breastfeed, they would give coconut water to the baby because the coconut water is very, very similar to mother's milk. Mother's milk is very similar to blood as well. The only difference is that there's more white blood cells effectively, and that's why it's got that white colour. So if you want to have good blood, you do it through these healthy plant foods, and that's how you build blood. Now, we talked about stroke, and let's see if you can get this right. You've got a person on the left and a person on the right. Now, one of them has had good blood flow and didn't get a stroke, and the other one had poor blood flow and had a stroke. Who thinks this person here had some problems? Can I have a show of hands? Yep, great. And who do you think? And you think the blood flow is better here? Well, it's an obvious question, right? But as obvious as this is, you would think that most people would know that if they want to avoid strokes, they would try to create this situation with good blood flow and avoid that kind of situation. You would think that would be, but that's not what people do. Most people eat the standard Western diet, which creates this sort of problem, and avoids a plant-based diet, which enables good blood flow. And what happens is that as cholesterol builds up, as it goes to the smaller blood vessels that lead to the brain and the small capillaries, it doesn't take much to block those. And in fact, some of those little blood vessels get blocked completely. Like, our back, for example, our vertebrae have got hundreds and hundreds of little capillaries that go all the way there. And often they get blocked. And with people who have chronic back problems and things like that, often it's because these little blood vessels are actually blocked to that extent. When I was a child, I had scoliosis, which is a curvature of the spine. I still have the scars of that today. And what I didn't know at the time was that I had a very, very high cholesterol diet. And I had a lack of blood flow going to the back, so some muscles would grow normally and others didn't, and then it causes a curvature as a result. And it's interesting, I had chronic back pain for about 10 years after that operation, until I actually switched to a plant-based diet, a vegan diet, and I don't get back pain anymore. Why? Because now I've now got proper blood flow going in there, so I'm getting nutrient and oxygen going there, and I'm not getting this histamine production, which is what happens when you get a lack of blood flow and oxygen. And so instead of taking antihistamines or something like that, you just take a healthy diet, and you don't get the pain, and you get to the cause of the root problem. And that's the same thing with stroke. It's the same thing with many conditions in the body. They can be alleviated just by switching to a healthy plant-based diet. Now, we were talking about the importance of greens. If there's one food that people aren't eating enough of, but by far across the board, is greens. In fact, Colwell Esseltyn, who's I think he's about 82 now, and is probably the most famous cardiologist or person who's done more work on people with heart disease, he actually recommends his heart patients have greens 6 times a day. Now, I mean, I'm a big advocate of greens, and I tell everyone they should eat, but that's really extreme. That's 6 times a day, that's a lot. But when you look at the science, it's a bit hard to argue with him, because the greens are just so incredibly important. In fact, have a look at this. This study here actually says that the odds of having glaucoma can be reduced 57% just by having 1 serving a week. That's nothing. 1 serving a week of collards or kale, and that just shows you what that can do just for a month. And we talked about the nitrates before, and how they help our endothelial function and arterial function. Well, here it says the dietary intake of nitrates has been demonstrated to have a wide range of beneficial vascular effects, including reducing blood pressure, as we talked about, inhibiting platelet aggregation, so you've got freer flowing blood flow instead of having all your blood clumping together, preserving or improving endothelial dysfunction. The endothelial part is the outer part of the inside of the artery, and that should be fairly flexible, and enhancing exercise performance in healthy individuals and patients with peripheral arterial disease. So that's another great endorsement. This is from the British Journal of Clinical Pharmacology, and this is interesting, because what they did is they had people injected with aflatoxin. Aflatoxin is a toxin that is in peanuts, and that some people are so allergic to that they can actually die from this exposure. And then what they did is that they had one group, and they watched their plasma aflatoxin spike as they were injected with it, and then the other group had some humble lettuce. Now, there's a lot of people going around saying, "Oh, well, lettuce is, you shouldn't be eating it. It's got no nutrition in it. It's got no calories. It's got no minerals." Well, you tell that to someone with aflatoxin. You've just reduced their level of aflatoxins by half just by consuming some humble lettuce. And that's by no means the healthiest of the greens. But even that is just shown to have enormous benefit for people. And that's just one leafy green. But now, this is something else that chlorophyll does. It says here that both light and light-absorbing chlorophyll metabolites can be present in capillaries, arteries and veins of several animals, including humans. If chlorophyll metabolites catalyze the photoreduction of plasma ubiquinol in vivo in the blood, it would be a novel mechanism to maintain high levels of plasma ubiquinol. Now, I'll decode that and translate that into English. What that actually means is that there's an antioxidant that most people know of called CoQ10. I think most people have heard that. In fact, they promote that all the time as giving supplements. Now, it's such a powerful antioxidant. It's really good for people with trying to reverse cancers and improve health generally. Now, what happens is when you use that up, it gets spent and it gets turned into ubiquinol, as it's mentioned there. Now, ubiquinol has no real major purpose, we didn't think, in the body until now. Because what happens is when you have chlorophyll and when that's present in the presence of light, sunlight in particular, it can then turn ubiquitol back into CoQ10. So instead of having to spend money on all these supplements that give you a chance of getting liver cancer and all these other problems, well, just by having greens and a bit of sunlight, you can actually turn the spent CoQ10 back into active CoQ10 again. That's what that study is actually showing, which is quite incredible. Now, a lot of people think that when you're out in the sun, that you're only getting a bit of sun on the skin, that it doesn't actually go any further. That's actually not true. If you get a flashlight and you can actually draw the light on your finger, the light will actually go through, because your cells are not like concrete, that just stops the light getting through. They've actually got gaps, and that light actually goes all the way into your blood. And when that sunlight reacts with things like chlorophyll and other microorganisms, it gives the body huge benefits. And that's why it's better to get sunlight, actual real natural sunlight, as opposed to vitamin D supplements. The vitamin supplements don't give you that benefit. They don't give you the actual light that's going to react with ubiquinol and give you all these antioxidants, give you all these other benefits. So that's just another benefit of greens there. And then this is another important recommendation there. It says that not currently smoking, not heavily drinking, walking 1 hour or more per day, or sleeping 6.5 to 7.4 hours per day, eating green leafy vegetables almost daily, and a BMI of 18.5 to 24.9. Now, these are some of the most important things that they're saying to do, but green leafy vegetables are actually in that. So it's, out of all of the things that you can actually do for your health, green leafy vegetables are right up there as high as anything that you can actually mention as far as trying to improve your chances of living a healthy, disease-free life. Now, the next section in that book is the protein section. Now, there's one question that you get asked a lot as a vegetarian, especially as a vegan, and I think we all know what that question is. Does someone want to mention it?
Where do you get your protein?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And it's amazing. With all the information we have available now, that's on the internet, that's at our disposal, and yet people still ask this question. It's quite extraordinary. Just to show what the science actually says, on average, vegetarians and vegans get 70% more protein. 70% more protein than they need. I'll say it again. 70% more protein than they need. Okay, not that there was ever any doubt about that. You know that when we are an infant, or a baby actually, we double our size in 12 months from when we're a newborn to 1 year old. Now, in that time, we're generating a huge amount of tissues. So our greatest requirement as a human being for protein as a percentage of our calories is when we're a baby. So even the strongest man in the world, who happens to be vegan, that's him there, Patrick Barbuvian, strongest man in the world, who by the way lifted 550 kilos above his head, which is more than the crush strength of the spine. Most people wouldn't attempt lifting weights like that, because most athletes, unfortunately, have got their capillaries to their back looking more like that and less like that, and so that the amount of oxygen and nutrients going to the back of your average weightlifter isn't going to be that flash. But Patrick Barbuvian, being on a vegan diet, knew that he could get that nutrient there, could train a lot harder, have less inflammation, so could actually build the strength and the muscles, more effectively than your average athlete he was competing against. So anyway, he's the strongest man in the world, and he doesn't have any problems getting his protein. But even him, who you would think needs a huge amount of protein because he's doing so much heavy lifting, he needs less protein than the baby in terms of percentages of calories. So the question is, well, how much protein does a baby get? And they must get a huge amount. Well, they get their protein from mother's milk. So, mother's milk, they must have a huge amount of protein. Well, actually, no. Of all of the mammals and there are hundreds and hundreds of species or thousands of species of mammals on the planet, well, the humans have got the lowest protein content of all the mammals, even lower than rabbits and other herbivorous animals. The lowest, the absolute lowest, okay? And it's 1.2% protein. That's all it is by weight, and it's 5% by calorie. So it's an incredibly low number. Now, every single fruit, vegetable, nut and seed has a minimum of 3 to 6% protein. So as long as you're eating plants, you're not going to have trouble getting protein. However, and in fact here they did a survey when they looked at how many people were actually protein deficient, and and they found it was less than 3% of the population who is the same percentage of people that are malnourished. So the two go hand in hand. When a person's malnourished, protein is also something that they're lacking. But then again, so is every single vitamin, mineral, and other nutrient that we know of as well. But what is more important is this. This is a question nobody ever asked you, but I think people should be asking this, and that is, where do you get your fibre from? Because when they looked at people in the United States and in Australia, it's the same, and they found how many people were getting the adequate amount of fibre. It was less than 3% of the population actually got enough fibre. Now, a lot of people are probably thinking at this point, well, who cares about fibre? Fibre is that part that you can't digest. That's the waste product. That's the stuff that we get rid of, right? That doesn't serve us any benefit. No. That's actually probably the most important part. It's probably the most important nutrient. So how is that possible? Because we're all told, that vitamins are important, and minerals and all these sorts of things. We talk about mineral deficiency. We talk about protein. Is calcium and all these sorts of things, and yet nobody ever talks about fibre. Well, a lot of scientific bodies are actually finding now that fibre is probably the most important nutrient. It's been linked to people with, say, breast cancer. They find they can virtually draw a straight line graph. Those with breast cancer have the least amount of fibre. Those that have a lot of fibre have virtually no breast cancer. When it comes to heart disease, a similar sort of correlation. When it comes to diabetes, most of our major illnesses are basically illnesses of not enough fibre. So of all the nutrients, that's the most significant one. So next time someone says, where do you get your protein from? Turn the tables on and say, well, where do you get your fibre from? You'd be guaranteed they'll never have heard that. They'll go, what? But that's what they should be asking. Now, this is interesting. Have a look in the amount of fibre intake of these males in this category here. And it's a very, very low fibre rate. And when I was on my old diet, I was probably in that category, and that's probably why I had so many health problems when I was a child. And that's a very, very staggering situation, that the intake of fibre in these groups in particular is so low. And now this is an interesting report where it basically says that the deficit is stunning in that dietary fibre has been inversely associated in an epidemiological studies with the risk of diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and various cancers, as well as risk factors for these conditions, including high cholesterol, blood pressure, and blood glucose. Therefore, it is not surprising that fibre is listed as a nutrient of concern in the 2005 and 2010 reports of the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. Now, interestingly, they did not put fibre, they put fibre as probably the most important nutrient, but they did not even mention protein at all as a nutrient of concern. That it wasn't even on the list. So as a society, our focus has been completely wrong. We're focusing on the wrong thing, not on the thing we should be focusing on. And what's also interesting about fibre as well is that not only does it pull all these acids and toxins out of the body and acts like a sponge through our intestines and a broomstick through our intestines, but it also provides nutrient for our intestinal bacteria. People are talking about having probiotics and improving the gut bacteria and so forth. Well, fibre is one of the best ways to actually build that good bacteria. The numbers increase dramatically when you have high fibre foods, and that's the single best way to have really good intestinal health and to avoid a lot of the bad bacteria and yeast infections and all of other things that invade where the good bacteria should be. So the best way to safeguard against that is with fibre. And it basically says that, the place you get that from is plants. There's no fibre in meat, in fish, in dairy, or in eggs, but there's plenty in plant foods. And this one here is a comparison of the nutritional quality of vegans, vegetarians, pesco-vegetarians, and omnivore diets. And then what they basically found here was that they actually compared different diets. And there's people often talking about the Mediterranean diet. And they say, oh, yeah, the Mediterranean diet, that's the one that helps you with heart disease. Yeah, I heard that helps you for cancer. Well, what they don't tell you is that the reason why the Mediterranean diet's better than the standard Western diet is because they eat a lot more plants. It's not because of the olive oil or because of who knows what. It's because they're eating plant foods. And when they compare the vegan diet versus the Mediterranean diet, and the Mediterranean diet is kind of a very obscure term, because even I mentioned one country like Avoda in Sardinia, where they have the longest longevity in the world. But in the very same country, in the same area in Sardinia, they have very different longevities. In one area, in Cagliari, they eat a lot of fish, and their longevity is about 70 years of age. And yet in Nevada, their longevity is closer, somewhere between 85 and 90. So even in an area of about 100 kilometres, you've got a very different kind of diet. And so labelling something a Mediterranean diet is kind of silly. So it depends which kind of Mediterranean diet are you talking about. Are you talking about someone that, eating in a cafe in Athens, or are you talking about someone living in the mountains of in Sardinia, or are you talking about, or what are you talking about? But when you take the meat out of that diet, then it becomes the same as the vegan diet, and then the longevity they get from a vegan diet is healthier than the average Mediterranean diet. And that's what this study actually shows. So we need to clear that confusion with people talking about Mediterranean diets. And just finally on the protein, we have a big section there about how excess protein actually causes health problems. In fact, most of the health problems that we have are due to too much protein and fat in people's diets. And now the next section is on bone health. Now, could I just have a show of hands? Who thinks that we need to drink plenty of milk to have strong bones and teeth? No, you must have heard this information before. Yeah, well, I think what we... Sorry? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, yeah, we're all told that we need to drink a lot of milk, from the advertising, again, from, these big corporations, the dairy industry, that try to convince people to do that, and they make kids drink milk from a very early age. I know that when I was in prep school, I was forced to drink some cow's milk against my will, and that was the first time in my life that I remember throwing up, was when they gave me some cow's milk. And then the next day they said, okay, well, in order to keep this milk down, we'll put some Milo in there to... yeah, so it's a form of child abuse, I think, is making kids drink cow's milk. But anyway, now it's been shown that when it comes to children's illnesses, that dairy is actually number one in terms of causing the most allergies, things like childhood eczema, asthma, respiratory infections, mucus problems, a whole range of things. So dairy is certainly right up there as one of the worst things that you can have. And what's interesting is that in the media lately, there's been all this push to get kids to have milk, and they're trying to say that it's unhealthy for children to be raised on vegan diets and all this kind of stuff. Well, in actual fact, when you look at the world's probably the most renowned pediatrician ever, which is Dr. Benjamin Spock, and he's a guy that has written more books on the subject of raising children and pregnancy and children of all ages, right up until adulthood and beyond. He basically concluded that unlike what he thought in the early days when he started, that he recommended a vegan diet was the optimum diet for the mother, for the baby at all ages. And that would be the only way to avoid a lot of these chronic illnesses that kids are struck with. So what, again, we're told through the media, and what the evidence actually shows is completely contrary. We're all told that the more milk you drink, the stronger bones you have, but that's not what the evidence actually shows. In fact, the opposite's true. The countries that consume the most amount of dairy have the most bone fractures and osteoporosis. The famous nurses study actually showed that the nurses drinking milk had more bone fractures and weaker bone tensile strength. And we mentioned in this book that a population like the Bantu, which I mentioned earlier, they consume 1/10 the dietary calcium of what we consume in the United States or in Australia, and yet they have the strongest bones of any population in the world. So the opposite is true to what we're told. A lot of people are debating over what the mechanism is of bone loss. There are studies that show that galactose is largely linked to the bone loss. Galactose is one of the sugars in milk, and in fact, that there's people that have an enzyme that actually can't break down galactose, and they find that those people they get massive bone loss, as even more than the average person. And but galactose has been shown to be contributed. Also, the other sugar, lactose, is also linked to it. There's been a lot of studies about the animal protein and its effect. It also has been shown, animal protein has been shown to actually pull magnesium out of the muscle tissue on a big scale. So not only does it weaken your bones, also it weakens your muscles as well as dairy. And we talk about that. We talk about magnesium and silicon for strong bones. Silicon's also an important factor for strong bones as well. And plant-based diets are a good source of both magnesium and silicon. And you know what's interesting is that that there are a lot of doctors going around telling people, oh, you have to be really careful on a vegan diet. Oh, yeah, you can be vegan, but you have to be really careful what you eat. Well, let me ask you a question. Who do you think has more nutritional deficiencies, a vegan or an omnivore? I think you know where we're going with this. Obviously, the omnivores have got more deficiencies. And in fact, there was something like only 3 nutritional deficiencies that they could identify that a vegan could be concerned about. And even then, they weren't that major. Whereas on a standard Western diet, there were 7 major deficiencies. And they included things like vitamin C, vitamin A, folate, fibre. They're things that in a vegan diet it's almost impossible not to get plenty of, and yet are rampant on standard diets. And magnesium deficiency has also been linked to a lot of bone loss and bone weakness, and plant-based diets have got plenty of magnesium. And so the question is, what are the best foods for building strong bones? Well, we mentioned in there things like broccoli, beans, Brussels sprouts, mustard greens, all kinds of greens of every type, celery. Those sorts of foods are particularly good for building strong bones and not dairy. Then we come to the section on common diseases, and we talk about cancer quite a bit on here. And one of the things that the China study actually showed is that the rates of cancer were prevalent in the groups eating a lot of meat. In fact, they found that there were over 40 different types of cancers that were correlated to meat and dairy consumption. Dairy consumption in particular was implicated with 3 different types of cancer: prostate cancer, breast cancer, and ovarian cancer, whereas meat implicated on most of the others like stomach cancer and colorectal cancer, lung cancer. And what's interesting with lung cancer is that the World Health Organization actually found that there was a greater link with meat consumption than there was actually with smoking now in terms of lung cancer. And we already knew that from the old studies in the 50s and 60s that lung cancer was 90% more prevalent in smokers compared to non-smokers. And at the time, in the 1950s, doctors were actually recommending patients to smoke. Now, when I say that to some of the younger people in the audience, they say, "Oh, that's impossible. That can't be true." You have to actually show them the evidence. So there were actually advertisements in the medical journals promoting cigarettes. It was incredible. And sometimes if someone who wasn't a smoker, they would actually recommend smoking to them just to get regular lung health, because they thought it was a good thing. Incredible. So it's no wonder that today, when you find that the majority of doctors, eat the standard Western diet, and they're recommending that onto their patients. And we have a situation where some doctors will take a patient who's got perfect blood levels, and I've seen this person with my own eyes, where they've got perfect cholesterol, blood pressure, iron levels, B12, everything you can think of, and then at the end of it, the doctor says, "Yeah, but I think you should get some protein. You need to eat some chicken and have some fish." After all that, and then I've had to butt in and I say, "Well, hang on a second. How many of your patients are not on medication?" And I say, "Oh, they're all on medication." "Yeah, well, this patient doesn't have any, and all their blood levels are okay." Name another patient that's got all their blood levels that's normal. I say, "Well, no, they've all got this problem: high cholesterol, high this." Okay, so why on earth are you telling that person to eat the same diet as all the other people that are making them that sick? Now, that particular doctor that I'm referring to is on a standard Western diet, and it's not particularly healthy either. But yet that's the embedded bias that a lot of people have. Like the smoking, doctors would recommend smoking to their patients back in the 50s. Today, a lot of meat-eating doctors are recommending that to their patients. And it's one of the biggest obstacles that we have, to get our society healthy is that issue. And anyway, we talk about some of these diseases like cancer. And in fact, I'll pick on one here in particular, which is colorectal cancer, which is the second leading cause of cancer death in the United States. Number 1 is lung cancer. But I've left lung cancer out of it, mostly because people think it's related mostly to smoking. But as I mentioned, it's not. It's actually meat is actually the biggest cause of that. And it's one of the things that they say is it starts off as a polyp. Now, what's interesting with this is that in many areas of the world, colonic cancer is very prevalent. In other areas, it's actually quite rare. And in fact, it says here, the bottom line, it says so-called third world countries, South America, Africa and Asia, the age-adjusted frequency of colonic cancer is relatively low, with an incidence roughly 7% of that of many developed countries. So if it's just genetic or if it's just just bad luck, then you wouldn't see that. And in fact, when you have a look at the range of colorectal cancer, you can see that in some areas like Uganda, it's about 1/100th of that of some areas in the Western world, like United States and some of these. Scotland's right up the top. Connecticut in the United States actually was the worst in that particular area. So the question is, well, what were those people in Uganda doing different than those people in Connecticut or Scotland? Well, there's one big difference, and that's their diet. One was a very, very high animal food diet, in particular meat-based diet, and the other one was a plant-based diet. And in fact, they found that there was Dennis Burkitt was one of these people who studied people in Uganda up until just around the time of the Second World War, and he found that some of them never even heard of colorectal cancer, didn't even know what it was. That's how rare it was in that country. And what's been found is that the more plant foods you have, the less colorectal cancer you have, because it pulls all of these what's called these fermented kind of toxins that are in meat that as a result of the putrefaction of meat, because not all of the meat is digested as it goes into it leaves the intestine. A lot of it stays in there, can stay up there for over 72 hours, and then as it ferments, it causes a whole lot of anaerobic bacteria, which is oxygen-deprived bacteria, to then propagate, and that causes inflammation, and that can lead to cancer. And so that's why it was very, very rare in these sort of countries like Uganda and Kenya, and you're very prevalent in the United States. You know what's interesting? We were talking about fibre before. Well, these people in Uganda were on a very high fibre diet. They were so regular that they had 3 bowel movements a day, and that's what a healthy person should have, the same as a baby, 3 a day. And in fact, when they wanted to get a sample from these people in Uganda, they could have produced a sample on request. That's how regular that they were. Right now what's interesting is that in the United States, let's contrast that. They have the worst rate of regularity anywhere in the world. They average 2.4 bowel movements a week. That's right, I'll say it again. 2.4 a week. Not a day, a week. Now, Metamucil, they came along and they said, we can improve that. We can improve it. Yep, we can get it from 2.4 to 2.8. Well, isn't that great? And then the American Prune Company said, we can do much better. We can get it from 2.4 to 3.2. Fantastic. Right. Well, these people in Uganda, 21 a week. And that's what healthy regularity is all about. Now, and yes, and Dennis Burkitt was as it says here, the father of the dietary fibre hypothesis. And they found that those that had the highest fibre generally had less cancer. However, there is going to be something else which I'm going to talk about. Why two populations with the same fibre, one still gets more cancer than another. I'm going to talk about that in a second, which you might find interesting. Right, now this is from the... I actually got something from the Australian Cancer Council. I never thought I'd actually use some of their slides for anything, but there you go. So it just shows you how cancer sort of spreads, and you can just see that, and you can see there that as the cancer starts spreading, and then the little blood vessels start then hooking up into those areas, and then you get bits of cancerous cells go into the bloodstream, and then they can potentially spread. This is how what starts off as like a little node, then a polyp, then just gets bigger and bigger. And I won't go into all this detail there. But anyway, this is the thing I was going to talk about was they looked at urban and rural Danes in Denmark, and they have a much higher incidence of colorectal cancer compared with their counterparts in Finland. Despite this, the Danes consume almost twice the dietary fibre. So how is that? Now, I've been just telling you how good fibre is and everything, so now all of a sudden we had this study, which people often love to do, because they want to try and justify meat-based diets, and so they'll say, we've got you. This group here, they consume twice the fibre, and yet they had more colorectal cancer, so explain that one. Well, if we read further, it says here, however, when these data are analysed for the relative phytate content, and we'll come to that in a minute, of the diets, the results show that phytate intake is 20% to 40% higher in the Finnish population. So what we're saying is that even though the Finnish people had less fibre in their diet, they had more phytates. Now, and the phytates are in things like beans, for example, and grains, and they have been shown particularly to be good with things like colorectal cancer. in reversing that. And we're all told that phytates are really bad. In fact, there are people saying, oh, you should have white rice instead of brown rice because the phytates actually stop you absorbing iron. And yet, all that the phytates actually do is that they bind to things that are going to cause cancer. Like heme iron is not a good thing. You want it binding to heme iron so you can get it out of the body. It shouldn't be anywhere there. And yet, we're told the opposite. We're told, oh, avoid phytates, have white rice instead of brown rice. I've heard people actually give this advice, even doctors, which is kind of crazy, because the evidence actually shows that phytates are one of the most anti-cancer things that there is. And in fact, it's been, sorry?
But the Finns also have like some of the worst heart disease in Europe, which is probably where they're losing out on the fibre.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're going to pay in other ways. You're 100% right. But that was just looking specifically on one
cancer.
Cancer. Yeah, you're right. The rates of heart disease were terrible. In fact, what was interesting is that in Finland they had a situation where they had the highest heart disease rate of anywhere in the world. And then the government actually decided to do a program where they wanted to switch dairy farmers to become berry farmers. And the program was really successful. In fact, they went from number 1 in the world for heart disease, edging out the United States at number 2, down to about number 60, all within about a 5 or 10-year period. So it made a big difference to them. And in fact, that's what we should do in Australia. We should encourage our dairy farmers, instead of asking the government to put a tax on Australians that aren't drinking milk, so we can bail out these big dairy corporations. Rather than do that, what we should be doing is encouraging more sustainable and healthy crops for us to consume.
Is anyone working on that?
Well, in fact, at VegVic, we're going to do a video which we're going to launch. That's one of the things that we're actually going to be.
It's terribly important.
Yeah. So and people need to lobby governments about that.
Yeah,
definitely.
Because dairy farmers just don't know what to do. They need to be given some options.
Yeah.
That are really good.
Yeah, because a lot of farmers actually think that they only look in the short term, that their livelihood is being impacted, but they don't look beyond what else they can do. But that example in Finland is a good one to
they
adopt.
need help.
Yeah, because in a lot of those dairy areas are actually very fertile, like in Gippsland. They're just absolutely perfect for growing many plant foods, not just berries, but broccoli or cabbage or whatever. There's a lot of things you could be growing in that area instead. So
the government really, you're going to work with the government, are you?
Oh, look, the thing is that, we're going to do our little bit, but ideally you'd hope that some of the other groups, every group really should be doing, like Animals Australia, and everyone should be.
But they're not, so it's up to you.
All right. Well, we're actually working on a video as we speak, which we're going to launch as part of this VegVic program, where we're going to have a lot of videos. So that's something we're going to do fairly soon.
Excellent. Yeah.
So anyway, we're getting back to phytates. They've been shown, as I mentioned, they're very good for getting rid of a lot of toxins and free radicals and things like heme iron that are particularly dangerous, when it comes to cancer. And it says there that the intake of meat is closely associated with the presence of highly refined cereal foods and in the diet of industrialised countries. And so again, phytates have been shown to be particularly good there. And again, the more meat and fish people had, and the less phytates, the more cancer that they had there as well. And in this case here, this is interesting because a lot of people say, we know that red meat's bad. The World Health Organisation is telling everyone that, but white meat must be okay, right? Well, have a look at this. When it comes to colon cancer, white meat intake was actually worse than red meat intake. So the next question is, well, how is that possible? Hang on, you've just told me how bad red meat is, the worst thing on earth, and now this is showing that white meat's even worse than that. Well, yeah, and I'll tell you why. Because white meat, not only does it contain the saturated fat that you have when you have red meat, in many cases it's more. Like if you look at salmon, it's actually got more fat than more than double than what you find in red meat. And we know that the saturated fat is pro-inflammatory. Plus, these white meats like fish and chicken are incredibly polluted. In fact, the biggest form of food poisoning is fish and chicken, both of them. You have Salmonella and Campylobacter from chicken, which is causing probably more food illnesses than anything, followed very closely with the seafood. And they contain all of these viruses, and they also contain a lot of heavy metals. and fish in particular contain massive amounts of mercury, cadmium, PCBs, dioxins, even traces of DDT and dieldrin that were banned decades ago are in massive amounts in fish. And what's interesting is the fish meals given to chickens now as a cheap feed, and chickens are as polluted as fish. So no wonder, people consuming white meat are actually at a greater risk than red meat, as bad as red meat is, which is worse than smoking. So pretty bad. Okay, next. Now there is good news about this, because the good news is that you can reverse a lot of these things with plant foods. You know that let's say that you were a long-term smoker, someone's been smoking for 30 years, they find that when you consume broccoli alone, that it is one of the most preventative things for reversing the harmful effects of smoking. And they did studies on smokers, and those consuming and I'm talking a cup a day of broccoli, which is next to nothing, they had a 50% reduction in lung cancer just by having an extra cup of broccoli in their diet. It's extraordinary. So the good news is there's a lot you can do with plant foods to reverse a lot of the damage that might have been done in the past with a meat-based diet. And again here, this basic study shows that the greatest risk comes from a high meat, low vegetable diet, which is pretty much backing up everything we've kind of been saying there when it comes to colorectal cancer. So I've really focused on that quite a lot there. There is other things that cause cancer. We could go on and on, but I won't. I'll just keep it fairly brief. There's these things called the AGEs, advanced glycation end products, and you can see there that these are a known carcinogen that feeds every single kind of cancer. And again, the biggest sources are meat. Obviously, barbecued chicken is actually the highest in this particular case here. And then you've got fried bacon, hot dogs, again, pork involved there, and then chicken, all different types of meat products. So then we come to the section of brain health, and now there's some interesting studies that we talk about in this booklet when it comes to brain health, and some of them relate to things like dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and also about having better cognitive improvement, reversing problems like depression, anxiety, all sorts of conditions that are prevalent these days. And these days, the biggest selling pharmaceutical drugs are now things like Prozac now, these psych drugs, not so much the cholesterol-lowering medications or blood pressure medications. What happened there? Oh, well, I think you know what? I think my computer's...
It's unplugged.
Okay. Wasn't plugged in. Okay. Normally it gives me a warning when it's... Okay. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll continue irrespective of that. Some of the studies that I was going to show you there show that people consuming fish actually had a degradation in mental cognitive ability compared to those not consuming fish. There was a study that I was going to bring up that actually showed that, and the study actually showed CEOs of corporations who consumed fish because they thought it was going to help their brain actually got the opposite result. But anyway, this is the first study. It showed that the effect sizes of cognition were small, up to 4.8%. However, these effects are a detriment that no one, let alone health-conscious and achievement-orientated people, are likely to welcome. This was the study of CEOs and executives in Florida, in the United States, who were eating fish because they thought it would improve their memory and their brain function and decision-making, and they actually ended up with a 4.8% degradation in brain activity. And so they were a bit shocked to see that. And it goes on there to say there that, yes, they had that drop. And one of the reasons was because of the levels of mercury that they experienced, and there was all other industrial pollutants and so forth that had led to also a build-up of cholesterol to the blood vessels, leading to the brain, and so there was less nutrients getting there, and a lot of that binds up with the heavy metals and other toxins that create inflammation. So that was quite an interesting study. Now, there are people saying that you need to have fish to have better brain function. And they say that because you need to have omega-3s. And yeah, it's true that omega-3s are necessary, but what they've also found is that when you have omega-3s in the form of fish, much of it is rancid and actually does more harm than good. Instead of it being anti-inflammatory, in many cases it's pro-inflammatory and has the opposite effect of what people were actually hoping to actually get. And that's what they found here, that these omega-3 fatty acids from fish were actually causing a degradation in brain function and an increase in dementia, rather than helping. Yeah, sorry?
So for the omega-3 come from the supplement, like fish oil, feel right, it's okay?
No. Well, in actual fact, when they did studies in the United States in 2010, there was an American medical journal study where they had two groups of people, one consuming fish oil and one not. Those having fish oil had 30% more cancer compared to those that didn't. So I would be avoiding that. Now, what that study showed was it didn't actually help with mental cognition at all, the very thing that's supposed to help with, and it certainly doesn't help with heart disease. That was the other thing. It was supposed to thin your blood so that it would mean that you're less likely to get a blood clot. Well, it hasn't actually helped with that either. It's actually increased the chances of having heart disease. So it's toxic, I know, on every level. So it increases your chances of cancer. It leads to brain degradation and actually gives you more chances of heart disease and increases your chances of diabetes many times as well. In fact, one of the things we mentioned in the book is that people consuming fish and fish oil have much higher rates of diabetes. In fact, fish in all forms is even worse than meat when it comes to raising your risk for diabetes. So absolutely would avoid it. Where do you get your omega-3s from is probably the question you're asking me. I wouldn't take it from supplements, but rather from food, from plant foods. You look at flax seeds, for example, they've got double the amount of omega-3s compared to fish by comparison. The form of omega-3 is mostly what's called ALA, alpha-linoleic acid, and it's got 18 carbons in its chain. The body converts that with an enzyme to then create what's called EPA, and EPA is a docosapentaenoic acid with 20 carbons, and then the same enzyme is used to convert that to what's called DHA, docosahexaenoic acid with 22 carbons. Now, when you do it through diet, it's far better than through supplements, because a lot of those supplements are rancid. In other words, they've gone off, they've oxidised, and they become carcinogenic in a lot of cases. Whereas if you eat a flaxseed and you just put it in a blender with your smoothie, or you put it in a coffee grinder and sprinkle it on your salad or something like that, you're releasing the omega-3s immediately there for the body to absorb, and that's the best way to consume them. Now, they're not the only source. I mean, there are chia seeds. I prefer flax to chia because chia is a lot more expensive and actually have less omega-3s than what flaxseed has. But even just eating a diet rich in greens, green vegetables, also gives you a lot of omega-3s just there. Yeah.
With the chia seeds, I always wondered whether, how with the flax seeds, when you grind them down or you put them in your smoothie, so to break them down to digest and get all the nutrients rather than just going through you. With the chia seeds, are they best eaten just soaked, or are they best eaten when they're actually... I've never put chia seeds into a smoothie or a blender because I didn't know if they were best broken down or not. Yeah.
Well, the best way really is to soak them and in water, and then as you know, they become like a gel. And
jelly,
that seems to be the best way. If you put them in a blender, the chances are they're not going to blend that well because they're so small.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to get a lot of benefit, and they really need the water to actually turn into like a jelly kind of substance.
If I'm going to put it in, what I do is I'll put them in after I've done the blender, like put the smoothie and then sprinkle the chia seeds in afterwards, rather than break them down. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard recently, Gregor did a video on it recently, and apparently it is like really chopping them up is the best way, and soaking them sometimes isn't enough. Like the gel isn't like fully the omega-3. Anyway, this is what I gleaned from this video.
I'll tell you one thing though. When they compare flaxseed with chia, that flaxseed actually is a far better source. And it's mainly the marketing with chia seeds that is the reason.
Soaking and blending, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's even better. Yeah, soak them and then blend them. Yeah, but anyway, but look, even without those two sources, just most plant foods, green leafy vegetables in particular, are loaded in that. There's a wild green that grows naturally called purslane, which is an incredibly high omega-3 source as well. And there are even a lot of native greens like dandelion and plantain got a lot of omega-3s. And so, yeah, it's important to get omega-3s, but a plant-based diet is a way you're more likely to get them. You see, the other thing is that when you consume a standard Western diet, especially when it has a lot of meat and fish, there's a lot of arachidonic acid that's present. Now, arachidonic acid is an it's omega-6 oil, rather, and it competes for the same enzyme that is trying to convert your omega-3s into EPA and DHA. And so when you're consuming all these animal foods, it's actually stopping your omega-3 absorption. And so when you go to a plant-based diet, you need less of the omega-3s as well. So definitely that's what I would recommend is switching to a plant-based diet. And if you're concerned about omega-3s, have a lot of flaxseed. That's the best source of that.
Does parsley have much omega-3?
It does, yeah. And all the greens have got a very good omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. And then that's really what you want. It's when the ratio is the other way that it overtaxes your enzyme and then you don't get much absorption. Now, there are some people that say, they may have atrophied their ability to convert the ALA into DHA, for example, although that is more a symptom of too much inflammation in the body and a lot of other issues, and usually too much arachidonic acid.
Can you regain that capability?
Yeah, you can, and it's been shown that is possible. People that are long-term plant-based eaters, especially whole food plant eaters, have been able to improve their ability to produce it. In many cases, that atrophies because there's already plenty already. So if you eat fish, you've already got it, and the body doesn't produce any more because there's too much, and then so your ability to produce it gets atrophied. So that's a concern as well. However, having said that, if people absolutely need the DHA, they can always get it from algae, which is where the fish originally get it from anyway. Because fish don't actually produce DHA; they get it from the algae, and the smaller fish are eaten by the bigger fish, etc. But I wouldn't recommend algae for a number of reasons. And there have been a lot of studies on things like spirulina, for example, and the cytotoxins that grow in them are really toxic. And in some people, they've got cancers and had all kinds of illnesses as a result of cytotoxins. So I'm not a big fan of having algae, but it's far better to actually get your omega-3s from flax seeds and greens in particular. Yeah. So anyway, I didn't actually talk about this. Now, a lot of people, when they talk about Alzheimer's disease, they say, that's all genetic, because they found that there's a gene called the APOE gene, which people who have that, they get Alzheimer's. And it is true that of all of the genes that they've identified, the one that's most correlated to any illness is the APOE gene, and that's true. However, the country that has the most APOE gene is in Kenya. Now, let me ask you a question. Do they have more Alzheimer's than the average or less? Who wants to take a stab at it? Less, exactly, and a lot less. Actually, they've got one of the lowest rates of Alzheimer's in the world. So if that's the case, then why is it? Well, the reason is because this particular gene, the way it works is that it inhibits your metabolism of cholesterol. So if you've got a little bit of cholesterol in your diet, the APOE gene actually keeps it in there and increases your chances of getting a lack of blood flow to the brain, which leads to dementia and it leads to Alzheimer's. But because these Kenyans are eating a plant-based diet and they're not getting the cholesterol, then it's having no effect on them. And so that's why they've got one of the lowest rates of Alzheimer's. A bigger influence is how much animal food you get. And then that's what you rarely hear about. What the medical establishment loves talking about is genes. Their whole business is all about genes. With this drug will attack that gene. It's got nothing to do with diet. It's all genetic. So you say, don't worry, eat what you want. And this proves completely in the face of that it's completely not the case at all. You can have that gene, and yet if you're on a plant-based diet, it has no negative effect on you at all. Okay, and in fact, this backs that up. It says, to date, the Nigerian, did I say, I think I said Kenya, sorry, it was Nigeria. Blacks have the highest observed frequency of the APOE in the world populations, but their adjusted mean cholesterol level is among the lowest reported. And so that's why they have such a low incidence of Alzheimer's in that population. And then post-mortem studies have recently shown that individuals with Alzheimer's disease have significantly more atherosclerotic narrowing of the intercranial arteries, a little bit like what we showed before. That when you have that kind of situation, you're more likely to get Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's disease has actually been shown to be very, very much like heart disease in the way that it actually works. That it is due to lack of blood flow that causes like a series of mini strokes that you find in the brain, and those little mini strokes actually cause a cerebral atrophy, which is what that means is that you've got portions of the brain that have died off completely, and then you look at an Alzheimer's brain versus a healthy brain, say two people of the same age, one that died of Alzheimer's and one that had a different cause of death, and you'll find that there could be half the brain actually missing on the Alzheimer's patient, purely because of this lack of blood flow going to the brain. So you can see that's really what Alzheimer's is largely about. And then this sort of backs that up again. It says that it should be reclassified from its present state as a neurodegenerative condition more to one that has its pathology rising from a vascular pathology. So it's more like a situation of lack of blood flow due to high cholesterol. So that's what that shows there. And then we go on just to summarise here. We talk about other things about vitamin A. That we get that from conversion from beta-carotene, which is present in things, not only carrots, as people know, and pumpkins and things that are orange, like sweet potato, but ironically, broccoli is actually a bigger source of beta-carotene. So on a plant-based diet, you should be able to get plenty of beta-carotene and convert that to vitamin A. We talk about iodine. Iodine is one of those deficiencies that both omnivores and vegans are actually have got a bit of deficiency in. And one of the best sources of that is sea vegetables, seaweeds, things like that are a big source of that. Having said that, if you're on a whole foods plant-based diet, you're less likely to be iodine deficient, because iodine is one of those elements that actually gets used up when the body is toxic and have too many, it's not on a very high fibre diet, and iodine gets dispensed of very quickly when you have a lot of the heavy metals and toxins and so forth in your diet. We talk about vitamin D and about the recommended sunlight levels that you should get in, like if you're living in Melbourne, and how many hours a day in the summer and winter. So that's all mentioned in the booklet. And I did mention why vitamin D is better, from a sunlight source than some of these tablets, which can give you liver toxicity and some other issues, and don't give you the full benefit of full spectrum sunlight, as I mentioned, like with ubiquitol conversion and so forth. And then I'll talk about B12. I'll just touch on B12 a little bit. B12 deficiency is something that sort of came about in 1948 when they first discovered vitamin B12, and what we've found is that there are a number of things that actually destroy B12 in our society. In fact, we are living in a very over-sanitised society where we have chlorine in the water, and that's a good thing because we don't get cholera anymore, and that's great. But there are other things that are destroying B12, and they're also destroying our good bacteria in our gut as well, things like antibiotics. Well, okay, when the antibiotics came about with penicillin back in 1938, when Fleming discovered mold growing on his, whatever it was, in his petri dish, and they thought, well, great, we've solved this problem of infections and bacteria and so forth. But what they've done is that they've actually killed a lot of really good bacteria. And as a result, the B12 levels that most people have dropped dramatically as well, as the good bacteria have died away. Then there are things like preservatives. You take a preservative like citric acid, for example. It works by killing bacteria. That's how it preserves things for such a long time. Well, those things also have a very negative effect on our good bacteria, and also have an effect of lowering our B12 status as well. Alcohol. Well, a lot of people in our society consume alcohol, and it's extremely detrimental to our good bacteria. It kills bacteria. That's why you can preserve things in alcohol in a jar for hundreds of years, because it kills bacteria. It preserves. Vinegar also has a preserving effect and also kills good bacteria as well. And then there are things that are industrial pollutants, things that are even putting in soaps and shampoos, like benzene and propylene have been shown to kill B12. Same with even fluoride, a lot of other heavy metals and things like that, and things like PCBs, dioxins. There's a list of 50 pollutants or chemicals that shouldn't be in our bodies that actually destroy our B12. And so that's why across the board now we have a B12 deficiency. And they're even giving B12 injections now to cows because it's a widespread sort of a problem. What is interesting, however, is that it's not just a problem for vegans. Omnivores have got equal issues with it. And in fact, according to one particular researcher who works at the Hippocrates Institute in Florida, he actually, from his own studies, that's Brian Clement. You can Google him. He's got a lot of videos on YouTube, and he actually said that from his studies that the vegans had better B12 status from the urine levels compared to non-vegans. And he said that one of the reasons for that is because there's a lot of things destroying the B12, even though it's present in meat. And in fact, in meat you have all of this arachidonic acid, which also destroys B12 as well. And so he noticed that, and then they also have more antibiotics and more preservatives, and there's huge amounts of preservatives in meat. So all of those were working negatively towards the good bacteria. Yeah.
What would you say to a GP who says to you that, you're lacking vitamin B, and if they want to give you a vitamin B injection?
Yeah, look, the thing is that there's a number of ways to get you B12 without getting an injection. And in fact, these days there's a lot of vegan foods that are fortified with B12. There are like even like So Good ice cream, the sanitarian that's even got B12 in it. But the thing is that we mentioned sources of a non-analog B12, like there's shiitake mushrooms, there's nori sheets, the seaweed sheets that they contain B12, and there's a guy called Dr. Susianto Sang from Indonesia. He's part of the Vegetarian Union and International Vegetarian Union. He did a number of talks over the last few years about his studies with tempeh. And he found that if you have a bit of tempeh, 100 grams of tempeh, you eat that daily, that gives you your daily requirement of B12 just there. Okay, so you don't necessarily need to get your B12 through an injection. There are other ways, of getting B12. Having said all of that, there are other people like Dr. Doug Graham who had dealt with a person who had B12 deficiency, and they had no B12 at all. And what he did is he put them on a water fast for 7 days. Nothing but water. So there's no, and it was filtered water. So you can't accuse them of putting B12 in the water or anything. Anyway, after that, the B12 level status came back to normal because a lot of the toxins that were destroying the natural B12 production actually were eliminated out of that person. Now, I'm not saying it works in every single case, but he reported that finding himself. So something to consider and to ponder, because certainly when we have good intestinal bacteria, then we're less likely to have a B12 issue. And Dr. McDougall actually has said that out of a million people diagnosed with B12 deficiencies, he says not one could actually say that's their biggest problem. Because when you get down to B12 deficiency, then that's a sign of a lot of other intestinal bacterial problems and lack of good bacteria. And, we are 90% bacteria. That's mostly what we are. Our own DNA is only 10% of us. And so if we have destroyed a lot of that good, healthy bacteria, we are going to be in a lot of serious health problems. And most of the autoimmune issues and inflammatory problems often come from too much bad bacteria and not enough good bacteria. And so that's a real big issue. And I think that has been largely ignored. And B12 is the one that they're putting in big flashing lights as the issue. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but I'm saying let's not ignore the root cause, which is a lack of really good intestinal bacteria. Because when you've got low B12, you can be guaranteed that you probably haven't got the right makeup of good bacteria in your gut as well. And again, no one ever talks about that. Like everyone talks about protein, no one talks about fibre, so too everyone talks about B12, no one talks about good bacterial constitution in our intestines as well.
And the other thing, even if you don't touch on it now because it distracts from this, but could you touch on water after that? Because you said about it's good that there's chlorine in the water, so there's no cholera. Can you recommend what's the best way?
Yeah.
Because there's so many different. There's filtered, there's distilled, and it's a bit confusing on which way to go with that. But if you maybe at the end, if it's too distracting from this, but I'd love to hear some information.
Yeah, well, I can just touch on it just now. Okay, it's important to filter your water for many reasons. Well, first of all, you don't want chlorine for the reasons that I mentioned, because it destroys a lot of your good bacteria. Fluoride also has been shown to be pro-inflammatory and leads to a lot of issues, even though they add it to help us, with tooth decay. Well, that's kind of debatable whether that's even effective. In fact, some studies they found when they were not fluoridating the water in Queensland, they had less tooth decay than the rest of Australia that was fluoridated. But anyway, that's also been shown to lead to fluorosis and a few other issues. You've also got traces of mercury and cadmium and arsenic and all sorts of toxins and hundreds of viruses in our water supply. So it's important to filter. So the next question is, what kind of filter? Yeah.
So not bottled
Yeah.
water, not of any
No,
kind,
well,
not even pure.
Well, I'll tell you what. Some of the bottled water, like, you know, without mentioning
I
names,
know a lot of it's not good.
yeah, they're almost as bad, if not worse, when they're tested compared to tap water. So, you know, I wouldn't be going that way. Not only that, the risk you have with bottled water is that you have things like you have BPA, and not only BPA. If they say BPA free, it's, I'm okay.
Yep.
Well, it could have BPS and BPF, which are also toxic, and they don't tell you about that. Okay, it can be as bad. So you don't want to be drinking out of plastic. Okay, so what are the alternatives? Well, there are different types of filters. You can buy the cheapest filter that there is, which is only effective in just getting a little chlorine and some of the basic kind of impurities, like your standard $30 Brita filter. It's better than nothing, but it doesn't get rid of a lot of the harmful stuff that I mentioned.
It's better than bottled water.
It's better than bottled water, but it's not really ideal. You could all boiling does is just basically kills bacteria. That's all it does.
And increases the fluoride content, doesn't it?
So what's that?
If you boil tap water, it increases the fluoride content.
It increases it only because you've boiled away quite a lot of it, and then what's left, all the heavy metals and everything are in more concentrated form. You're right. So you're left with a greater concentration of heavy metals and more dead bacteria. Instead of light bacteria, now you've got dead bacteria to deal with. So boiling isn't really going to help. It does get rid of the chlorine, though, because that's a gas that evaporates. Okay, so the next level is you have things like distillation, and you have things like reverse osmosis. Yeah, you have ion exchange systems, and you have carbon resin filters. You have all of these sorts of things. It depends how much you want to spend. The thing is that the reverse osmosis is probably the most expensive way of getting rid of like fluoride and all of those sort of things, but also uses a lot of water in that process. Distillation involves a lot of electricity to then turn it into steam and then to condense it. The only problem with distillation is if you've got things that have got a boiling point less than water, like some solvents, for example, or oils and things like that, then you can turn them into vaporize them, and then you condense them back again, so you haven't got rid of them. So that's an issue. And these days, with a lot of these kind of even like with aviation fuels and things like that, that have a very high flash point, can evaporate quicker than water. You don't want to be distilling them into your water, so that's not really a good solution
but
either.
If you use a filter after distillation, then
that is one. And in fact, a lot of the distillers have that. They have a filter that goes on after it. Correct. So that's another option. Now there is one like this pure water on tap. They've got they have a 3-stage filter. One's a carbon resin, then they have paramagnetic rocks, and then they have another stage as well that has been tested to get rid of about 99% of fluoride, which I think is probably a fairly cheap option. It's all up to about $200, and you can just put it on your desktop. So if you want a cheap solution, that's probably the cheapest.
Is that 99% down to 1% of where it was, or is that like in relation to the natural level of fluoride which is in water anyway?
Well, it's a good question. It gets rid of 99% of the fluoride that is in the
added
drinking
fluoride.
water. The added fluoride.
So it brings it just down to natural level?
Probably, yeah. It'll probably get it down to what probably is naturally occurring in the water. Yeah. So those be the options. So so the ones that will get rid of fluoride are reverse osmosis, distillation, or this 3-stage kind of filter, which is a range of different things in it. And the pure water on tap one's probably the cheapest option, but the others are probably better long term if you want to spend the money. So
also the people who do the fasting at True North Health, they use the distillation and the filter afterwards. As long as you have that filter afterwards, you should be okay with it. Yeah.
If you tie it in with the B12 thing just before, like if you get your spring water at Donnedu, it's got B12 in it from the ground.
Absolutely. In fact, there's been a lot of drinking waters around the world have been tested, and they've got natural B12 levels in them. That's right, and without having any added chlorine.
But go there if you're interested in going to Donnedu. Go during the weekday, because it's absolutely so many people. It's mobbed now. There's like five cars, all with like huge containers. Word's getting out. More people living in Melbourne.
They've got these signs now saying that obviously the council or someone put, don't drink this water, and the normal, like people like us, scratch out and says, do drink it.
Yeah, that's right.
By the way, B12 tablets, best put under the tongue so they go straight into your blood system. angine or something like that. It gets straight through to the blood system because if you have something then in your stomach, antibodies in your stomach to the intrinsic factor can actually kaput them, kaput the B12. So it's best to get straight into the system under the tongue with a tablet rather than
it gets in your bloodstream quicker.
Well, it actually gets there.
Yep.
Sometimes it might not.
That's right.
What about alkaline water?
Okay, it's a good question. The reason why people promote alkaline water is because most people tend to have too much acidity. Like you look at people with kidney disease, for example, they find that the more acidic their pH, the more kidney stones they have, the more inflammation of the little blood vessels of the kidney. They find people with gastric reflux, for example, that's because there's too much acid, that is rising up and it's not being eliminated. So when you have something like alkaline water, it gives you a little bit more alkalinity, and so the body can neutralise those acids. With someone in that sort of situation, it can be beneficial because it gets rid of acidity. You can probably achieve the same thing far cheaper by adding sodium bicarbonate into that. Now, sodium bicarbonate occurs naturally in a lot of, like in Donnedu, for example, there's some in there. If you go to Hepburn Springs, some of them actually say that it contains a lot of sodium bicarbonate, something that in the water we used to drink years and years ago actually contained that by default. And the saliva produces a lot of sodium bicarbonate already to neutralise acids as we're chewing it. The cover cells of the stomach actually produce it and help us also eliminate a lot of the hydrochloric acid, which is on the gastral pits of the stomach. And our pancreas produces it and sends it to the duodenum, which is basically at the end of the stomach and at the start of the upper intestine, to neutralise acid, so that we have a very alkaline pH in our intestine between 7.4 and 8.4. So having something like alkaline water does help get rid of a lot of acidity if people have got that. Most of the acidity people have is from the standard Western diet, having said that, and it's no good just saying, they'll continue eating the standard Western diet and just have a bit of alkaline water. It's not going to help, because the alkaline water doesn't have any fibre, it doesn't have any phytates, doesn't have all these nutrients that you need. Sorry?
Diluting the acidity in the stomach.
Well, that's an interesting question, because our pH in our stomach is somewhere between, it's about 4 pH. And the thing is that when they actually look at digestion, they don't actually find that the acidity is that strong that it can actually break down anything. It doesn't actually do that. Most of the digestion occurs when we chew the food. When we chew it, we break it down and we kind of pulverise it. And in fact, one of the best things for digestion is to chew heavily, before you swallow. Then you turn it into like a liquid, and then it goes down into our stomach. And then what happens is that our stomach actually has a number of cover cells around it that actually excrete sodium bicarbonate in the outer walls of the cover of the stomach. And then the hydrochloric acid actually drops to the bottom of the gastral pits. Ironically, where very little contact is where the food. So it's debatable how much those acids actually play a role. In fact, one thing is for certain, the body tends to do a great job of eliminating. When you look at a healthy person, they eliminate the hydrochloric acid really well out of the body. A person that isn't on a low-fibre diet and eating a lot of animal foods, they tend to get a build-up of this hydrochloric acid, and the acid turns into carbon dioxide and burns the esophagus, and it leads to heartburn. So what's been shown is that too much acid is a very bad thing. So it's questionable, these people taking these hydrochloric acid tablets, what they're actually doing. Are they making the problem better, or are they making it worse? I suggest they're making it worse. Because what tends to be happening is that rather than these acids actually breaking the food down, that there's evidence actually showing that what we're doing, we're trying to alkalise the food, because the pH in the intestine is between 7.4 and 8.4. That's what it is. And in fact, the pancreas is producing sodium bicarbonate to bring the pH up. So you're not really trying to use acids to break things down, and the amount of retention time that you're having in the stomach is not enough to actually, with acid, with a very low, weak acid that we have, to actually break anything down. And most of the food's broken down by your teeth already, and it's already in a liquefied form. And then in that form, then as it goes into the intestine, then the intestinal villi are immersed in this, and then we absorb nutrients that way.
Because I've got an alkalizer, and sometimes I worry a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, look, the thing is that water in nature is slightly alkaline anyway. I mean, seawater is about is almost the same pH as our blood, which is about 7.365, and a lot of the water in some of the running streams are up to about 8, which is slightly alkalising. So all you're doing is probably bringing it up to the pH of what the water should be, whereas tap water is close to about 6. so it's a little bit acidic.
It's probably a really good.
So it's probably not a. I mean, I don't think you're doing any harm by doing that. So yeah. But
Melbourne tap water probably is slightly acidic. Donnedu is slightly acidic, and that's like the root of it. That's where it pours down from. But it's only slightly acidic, like 0.5 type thing. 6.5.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I certainly don't see any harm in it. The only harm is if people think that they can do that instead of eating a plant-based diet. But if you're just supplementing, or if you're just drinking that instead of regular, well, it's probably doing a good thing. It's probably that alkalinity is probably helping you, I'd say. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. All right, now I'm nearly finished actually. Now I did mention that book had 259 references in it. We only had room to publish the first 99, but for the rest of them we can actually go into the website there, which is the reference section of the VegVic website. You can download the rest of the references that are mentioned in the booklet, and that's the VegVic reference page there that shows you the references, and all the way down to the end, 259. And so that's basically the end of the presentation, and I'll now take questions. Yeah.
You talk a lot about broccoli being one of the greatest foods.
Yep.